There's so much overlap between theater lovers and book lovers. I think the Venn diagram is basically a circle. Hi, I'm Steph, and I love to read otherworldly books. And today, I want to recommend some books based on musicals. Now, sometimes when I do these sorts of videos, some grumps come into my comments and they say things like, well, if you like Les Mis the musical, then you should just read Les Mis the book. And to that I say, sure, but you could just Google that, right? Like, I'm here with a hint more creativity. Yes, if you love something, it's really cool to check out the source material or to experience it in other forms. But I try to think about the themes and the characters and the vibes and just about how these books and musicals made me feel. So that's how I pair them up, and I think I'm decently good at it. Also, if you like Wicked the musical, you might be better off staying away from Wicked the book. But let's mosey along to some book recommendations, because that's what you're here for. Let's start off with Heathers, which I feel like I have such a perfect recommendation for. And that book is called Fury by Shirley Marr. We start off with this teenage girl, Eliza, who's sitting in a police station. We find out right away that she's being held on a murder charge, but we don't know who was killed or why. And then the book works backwards from there. We know Eliza has this picture-perfect life from the outside. She's got a beautiful home in a fancy, exclusive community, a great education, and a friend group of popular girls. But, of course, nothing is as it seems. This book is dark, it's snarky, but it's really very clever. It starts out masquerading as the story of spoiled, shallow teenagers, but bit by bit the layers are peeled back. It really subverted all my expectations, and it will keep you hooked while you try to figure out the truth. At the beginning, Eliza is framed as this sort of unfeeling and unflinching queen bee, and there's definitely some truth there. She's got a cold exterior, but underneath that, she's a broken girl with so much rage. She's trying to stand up for others that have been wronged, and she's also essentially raising herself and figuring out her own safety and independence. She's a super unreliable narrator, which makes for an intense ride. Everything is filtered through her cynical worldview, and she puts up these walls, but she's super unapologetic about who she is. She can definitely be unlikable and even pretty nasty. She was forced to view all of her vulnerability as a weakness that others could use against her, but I thought she was a sympathetic character. She's just been warped by her circumstances. In some ways, she's actually a combination of Veronica and JD. Both Heathers and Fury use dark humor as a way to explore deeper topics like sexual assault, bullying, and eating disorders. They've both got witty, venomous, murderous high schoolers, and they both feature mean girl trios. High school is dark, and these sorts of stories continue to feel more relevant than ever. They've both also got themes of vengeance. Fury includes plenty of winks to the Greek Furies, hence the title. It's about wronged women taking fate into their own hands. Eliza is trying to unravel the threads and the hows and not yet understanding that sometimes life is out of her control. I definitely recommend Fury and all of its venom and teenage rage, and for what shimmers slightly below the surface. Next up, I've got a recommendation for all of you Phantom of the Opera fans. If you comment read the Phantom of the Opera novel, I will reach through the screen and smack you. Only teasing, but I do think that you Phantom fans will love Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid. This book follows Marr, who is the plain-faced third daughter. She's absolutely obsessed with fairy tales and uses them to find meaning in every aspect of her life. Her mother is gone, and her father is a wizard who is cursed to never feel satisfaction. He's very controlling of his three daughters and very cruel. All three of them are skilled witches, but their dad takes all of the money they make from helping other people, and he also doesn't let them leave the house. Then, one night, the sisters sneak out to see a ballet at an opera house, and Marlikin falls 100% head over heels in love with the main dancer. So now she suddenly has her first ever secret. She's got this massive, deep desire, and that's kind of balanced with all of this past trauma that she's reframing through tropes. And on top of all this, there's a monster on the loose, terrorizing their city. Both Phantom and Juniper and Thorn follow characters that are shaped by trauma, and also how we use storytelling to find purpose and meaning in dark circumstances, and how you learn to live with your past. In Juniper and Thorn, fairy tale tropes are integrated with darkness and horror. The writing is really, really vulnerable. There's also a theme of beauty versus ugliness, or perceived ugliness, and monstrosity, and the natural versus the supernatural, and jealousy and revenge. If you love In the Heights, I could not have a more perfect pairing for you. It's called When We Make It by Elisabet Velasquez. First off, this book is in verse, so I know all you musical lovers are already excited. I love books in verse so much, I could probably do an entirely different video all about that. But anyway, this book follows Sarai. She's a Puerto Rican teenager living in Bushwick, Brooklyn. She shares her hopes very intimately and personally, and she questions her identity. She also agonizes over her family pain and trauma, and she questions the future of her neighborhood and community. Each poem absolutely bursts with personality. She shares her quietest thoughts and her loudest dreams. The whole book felt like this energizing explosion of heart and spirit. All the characters spoke both earnestly and very directly and honestly. I was captivated by her and hopeful and heartbroken at certain moments. There are definitely tough subjects in here, and life isn't easy. Topics covered include family trauma, abuse, sexual assault, drug use and overdosing, teenage pregnancy, sexism and objectification, ignorance and privilege, gentrification, communication, and so much more. The writing felt very grounded and very connected, and that's because it was super real. Like In the Heights is in some ways a love letter to Washington Heights, When We Make It is a love letter to the author's hometown of Bushwick. And the neighborhood really is its own character. It comes to life. And plenty of specific locations are mentioned, so if you're local or if you're visiting the area, you could totally do a book-inspired walking tour. The writing celebrates resilience through art and joy, and how your block can become your family. Both stories include first-generation young people living in NYC. They're emotionally affecting, and take a look at the systemic pressures of the immigrant experience. They both involve hardships, but they're also both celebrations of self and identity and of a yearning that's incredibly affecting. Anyway, those were 3 examples connecting musicals and books. These are some of my favorite videos to make, so feel free to request musicals in the comments and maybe I'll use some of them next time. And also, I love finding other people who have read these books and know the musicals and immediately agree. It's very affirming. If you want to chat about books and theater and more together, please come hang out with me on Bindery. It's like a bookish Patreon, but there's a tier that's completely free. It brings all of my content together from across all platforms, and it features this searchable bookshelf that has all the books I've recommended, and when you click on a book, it brings up all the videos where I've mentioned that book. It's so cool. And there's a Discord community that has a theater channel, and I would love to have you come join me there and we can talk about all of the recent Broadway shows. And if enough of you join my Bindery and engage there, I could have the opportunity to publish a book under my own imprint. So if you vibe with my content, that's the absolute best way you can support me.